Welcome back, and we're going to continue our discussion with Republican strategist Ford O'Connell and the senior advisor for Progressives United, Josh Orton. Gentlemen, we appreciate that spirited debate about the final debate in North Carolina last night, even though Josh might quibble with the definition of terms. I want to talk to you now about a couple of other Senate races. Let's move across the map to Kansas. Greg Orman, once a Republican, then a Democrat, now an independent, becoming the candidate challenging Republican incumbent Pat Roberts. Ford, it looked tough for Pat. Is it still tough for the incumbent to hang on in Kansas?
It's going to be a very tight race. Let's understand two things. As much as a hot mess as Pat Roberts has been, Greg Orman is a Democrat in sheep's clothing who the Soros syndicate's throwing fundraisers for. And frankly, Kansas has not sent a Democrat to the U.S. Senate since 1932. It's a tough one. Pat Roberts created this mess, but really at the end of the day, he's likely going to win in stark red Kansas, if you will.
Well, what about that? Greg Orman, the, quote, independent, Josh. Now, he doesn't mind getting that George Soros dough, does he?
Well, actually, I think we might have a rare moment of agreement here between Ford and I agree that Pat Roberts created this mess himself. You know, he's been in D.C. for too long. He hasn't been in touch with Kansas. And look, I think that the interesting thing that this is happening in South Dakota as well is when this comes up, when independents are deciding to take the reins here, it's benefiting Democrats. And I think that the point is that I think that Ford will probably agree with is in a midterm election, there's an anti-incumbency wave generally, and the president is obviously has the party in power, but that doesn't mean that some incumbents like Pat Roberts aren't going to be on the chopping block as well.
But Josh, Greg Orman is not an independent. Forget the fact that he's given money to Obama. Forget the fact that he's voted for Obama. Forget the fact that he sides with Obama and Obamacare. The Democrat Chad Taylor dropped out of the race. I've never seen a situation in my life where a Democratic nominee drops out of the race in a major race and then actually legally pushes to make sure that a Democrat can't come back on the ballot. It's quite clear here. Kansas is a deep red state, and frankly, Kansans are going to wake up to this even if they have to hold their nose for Pat Roberts.
Well, that's an interesting prediction. Josh, you say that Greg Orman's going to win, I would imagine. You'll stay with that, right?
Yeah, I do, and I think that Ford is rightly concerned that Greg Orman's going to win and caucus with Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid.
So much for independents, but I know he said he'll caucus with whomever is in the majority. We have a minority of time here. Josh Orton, Ford O'Connell. Gentlemen, as always, we thank you very much. Let's continue talking about the midterms. This hour, our Newsmax elections team takes a look at the race for governor in Michigan, where incumbent Republican Rick Snyder hopes to win re-election.
When the Great Recession swept the country, Michigan was already reeling, particularly in Detroit. The city was bleeding jobs, and when it was all said and done, found itself billions of dollars in debt. Recovering looked bleak. Enter Republican Governor Rick Snyder, who's up for re-election. Snyder is drawing criticism from Democratic challenger Mark Schauer for handing the city of Detroit over to an emergency manager and opening it up to controversial cuts to pension plans for city workers. During their debate, Schauer accused Snyder of throwing Detroit and its people under the bus. That accusation didn't faze Snyder, telling voters to look at the numbers. His plan for Detroit is working. The candidates' differing views on how to handle government money problems is one reason both parties are giving this race so much attention. Whoever winds up in the governor's mansion will be key going into 2016. A red or blue influence from the top plays a big role in how Michigan and its 10 electoral votes will swing. It also gives potential presidential contenders insight into policies voters are favoring. In this case, extreme belt tightening.
And the most recent poll shows that Michigan's incumbent governor Rick Snyder enjoys an 8-point lead thanks to support that he's now garnering from independent voters. Go to Newsmax.com as we continue our countdown to the midterms, and be sure to join us here on Newsmax TV on election night for our special live coverage of the midterms. You decide 2014. Don't go away. There is more to come on America's Forum, including a documentarian whose last name is Noon, who says it ought to be high noon for the EPA and runaway regulation.